Welcome back to another episode of Net Talk. We're here again. I'm Alex.
I'm Mitch.
Today we're doing a bit of just chit-chat about stuff that we're doing more and more over this program and learning skills with in our interpretation and application of statistics and the analytic side of volleyball. Something that becomes more of a focus as you get to higher and higher levels. I'm always a little bit on the fence about leaning too much on them and using them as a crutch because decisions still need to be made outside of that. And sometimes interpretations can be flawed or miss things and here and there. And we'll be talking about how we want to progress in that.
But before we get to that, how you going, Al?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, yeah. I got a really bad sleep last night because I tried to watch the V-League from the episode on Tuesday and fell asleep in the fourth set and then woke up at 3 a.m. and I was like, oh, whoopsie.
Yeah.
Well, not quite. We turned it off and then I was like, all right, sleep time, and then woke up at 3 and then I was like, okay, I just can't sleep. And then here we are.
Here we are.
But it's better than feeling like I ran a marathon and,
I had a great sleep after that though. You would have had a nap and then a sleep. It was, yeah.
I'm not a nap guy. I just can't. But today, before we start though, maybe a disclaimer, we mentioned it, or I mentioned it on the Tuesday sesh, but no one's really there's no, that I'm aware of, statistical training for coaches. There's coaching courses and I'm a level 3 national coach. Do I feel comfortable coaching at a national level? No, but that's the title. In the 3 or 4 coaching courses that you do to get to that, there's no or very, very little statistical training.
Yeah, more focuses on player development for a long time and the environment.
Which is important, but I personally enjoy or at least would like to learn the stats side. So Alex and I are just doing our own research of this. There's things we're going to get wrong. There's things that we maybe don't know or we just,
As a coach, you're judged on the outcome of your team.
Also true.
But really there's very limited ways to influence a game.
No, and stats is a tool that is, I guess, because other than emotional and the eye test and genuine results, this is the only sort of quantifiable data where you sort of go, that decision led to this.
Yeah, so it's seeing probably how you can look at that and see how your team's shaping up across certain team-based metrics as well.
Yeah.
To design your trainings and what needs to be improved.
And plans against certain teams. If you're in a league that has that kind of data, even in our state league at Premier 1, there is not that kind of data around. At AVL there is. And actually, I think it was only this year that there was.
And volleyball just still needs more metrics that other sports have. All those other things that...
The biggest two things that come to mind is defensive stats. Pretty much only VNL and above does that. In all the pro leagues that we're following, none of them do defensive stats. Also soft blocks and / recycle balls.
Yeah.
I think that's a new, especially since it's becoming more and more part of the game.
Yeah. Because I think the game has shifted a little bit to be less side out based, 1 point, another point, just done, to be a little bit more of that rally win rate.
Yeah, and
look at
recycling, using blocks, that sort of stuff. But going back to that disclaimer, if you, the audience, feel like we maybe missed something or of a good resource that is informative, feel free to let us know, reach out, share it. At the end of the day, we're all just out here to have a bit of fun and learn a bit of stats. But let's get into it. The first one on the list is side out percentage versus break point percentage. For those who don't know stats, and there's going to be a fair amount of you that listen, we assume. Spotify doesn't give me the most in-depth analytics on who actually listens. But what are those, Alex?
Well, side out is your serve reception.
Yeah.
So that's winning points off serve reception. Probably you'd be looking at how efficient your passing is. You're setting distribution and how even you are on attack. Break point percentage, you're then looking at how much
you hold the serve.
How much you hold the serve, your effect from your serve, from behind the service line, your effect as blockers, and maybe your defensive systems.
Yeah.
So teams what would you be aiming for as your side out percentage? Because I've got like old school numbers in my head that I was told.
I also have that. I'm being told / I've read in articles that you should be around that 60 to 70% side out.
Yeah.
Which honestly, I think these days that tracks fairly well. Like looking at the AVL statistics that we covered this year, that was fairly not obvious, but like that was around the ball mark. I think for women's is a little bit lower because the like kill rate is a little bit lower as a whole.
Yeah.
But that was just an observation for that specific league. In terms of whether that is different at a higher level or based on what league you play, like the Italian league versus Polish league versus Japanese league, I don't know. We don't have access to the league, just game statistics. But I have 60, 70%.
Yeah, that's the number I have in my head that I also remember a beach volleyball coach telling me like to aim for, that you need to be doing these certain things to win points, because it's just that little bit harder to win points on break point.
Yeah.
The advantage is really for a receiving team.
Yeah.
Because if you have good pass efficiency, even this year, like stats we looked at probably a little bit more than ever on match reports and through games, is like teams' point win chance on negative reception, on positive reception.
Yeah.
Sort of seeing how effective you can be based on the pass, because you have no control over how aggressive the other team is serving at you. If you're against a really good serving side, you will probably expect your passing percentages to drop.
Yeah.
But you still need to find ways to be effective. And then something that's hard to track is setter influence, because are setters just ranked by team stats of how effective your hitters are?
Certainly.
Sometimes that can do damage to some setters that might look better than that, but they're just maybe
grouped into the team. Just going into a bit more depth on some of those things when we're talking about side out percentages. One question that I regularly have, but I think I know the answer to it, is like, I would be curious if there's more in-depth stats in terms of like whether you side out directly off that first pass or does that rally continue and you do end up siding out.
Yeah.
That's a question that I have. I don't think it is reflected in most stat sheets. I think some have it. I think sometimes there's a little box down the corner. It's like first reception side out percentage. I think I've seen it once, or I could be making this
Which
up.
is why we've tried to look at a good sort of cheat way of catching that is like looking at a team's total attempts at attack, because
that'll tell you
if you lose
how much they rally.
If it's a 3-0 game, like the most amount of points you can win if it's just standard sets is like 75, because you win 25, 25, 25.
Yeah.
But so if you have 100 attacks,
it's like
those points are lasting a long time, because you're not just winning.
That was what we noted with the Adelaide women's AVL team this year, is they were consistently sitting around like 120 attacks, whereas every other team was around 90.
Yeah.
And whoever played them, well, obviously you're in the same rut. So
you're also seeing
getting
a boost
inflated
in those games. So then comparing between matches and seeing those shifts. And that's why I also like looking at, because it's a thing that I tried to drag from other sports, like rather than just totals, because like the VNL website was always just like
just totals. Yeah.
But it's like, I'd like to see what they're doing per set, but we just did per game, because you're seeing team averages then per game, trying to even that out rather than like certain game giving big boosts to totals.
It's a bit more fair, especially if you play a weaker team and suddenly all your averages are inflated per game, but per set is a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, like
you can just remove outliers and still have to verify the average with that. But like the totals for players that, I mean, this year in the MAVSL, like players that sit a fair few games don't get shown on top leaderboards of total stats.
Even though they were very
they are the best players in the league sometimes, and they've got
that can work,
management or other issues. Yeah.
That can go both ways as well. Like we saw players at the top of leaderboards drop because they were being overused. But going back into that side out breakpoint percentage is something that you touched on that I don't know if everyone would understand. So I'm gonna break it down a little bit more. Is when Alex talks about your side out percentage based on positive or negative reception, all that's saying is that if you pass well, you side out at this percentage. So if we pass really well, we're siding out at like 80%. But if we pass bad, so we pass negative, we're siding out at about 50%. So that obviously would, go in between that in terms of your total side out percentage. But I liked that a lot this year with the MAVSL stats because you got to see, for example, the WA men's team, they regularly could side out at quite a high percentage when they passed negatively, which basically as a coach tells you as a team like, all right, yes, it's always going to be easier to side out when you pass well, but we are not too bad at passing negatively and still siding out.
Yeah.
Would you agree that that's a stat that like is quantifiable? Like, all right, we passed negative, but our side out percentage after passing negative is still at 60%, that's actually quite high.
Yeah,
probably still
hitters,
around 50%.
Yeah, if you have hitters that are very adjustable, because as that set is dragged off the net, there's a little bit more variation in the ball that'll come out of those hands.
Yeah.
But when you have very versatile hitters at the sticks, you still have multiple options. So blocks are still maybe caught out a little bit, and then they're still getting a nice attack position.
Yeah. And negative, our interpretation, especially with the MAVSL stats, our interpretation of negative reception side out percentage, that's a massive load of words, is basically just if they couldn't run the middle. That was our interpretation. If they couldn't run the middle,
less than a 2 pass.
It was less than a 2 pass, and then it was like, all right, that's pretty much you're out of system at that point. Breakpoint percentages are less fun, I think. I think that's just about, all right, how can we hold the serve? I suppose that would just be about your ability to transition attack, which we do have stats for later. But
I mean, we looked over a Mark Lebedeau investigation of like a little earlier today on breakpoint versus serve efficiency, sort of where that happy medium is of you can increase your serve error rate if your breakpoint rate also increases, but there's points where that drops because
there's a diminishing return.
So there's like a slight increase. So you really want to be at that slight serve efficiency couple errors, because if you're not serving errors, you're not putting pressure on, so you're not break pointing.
Was that a ratio as well? Was that the ratio?
Yeah, it was a percentage. So it was like
a 15%
serve error, serve efficiency to 40%. It was like the most efficient servers have no errors.
I mean,
but
then the break point goes down.
The break point came down,
right?
Because it translated that between. It was a bit outdated a couple of years ago. That was a VNL stat, but then I didn't investigate what high school competition. It had high school boys, high school girls, and it just plummeted because in high school, get the ball over the net and you almost are in a better position than trying to serve it, and you're serving more errors than ever.
That's the other thing that's really important with stats and stuff is you've got to apply it
league
relevant
context.
Like you are probably most definitely not siding out at 70% at a high school volleyball.
No.
I think the rallies go for far longer because people just, or maybe they don't. But
they go shorter probably on average because there's just error.
There's so many error rates, right? Or depending on what level, like if we're talking year 7s or we're talking year 12s, and then everything is different. But I think as a general rule of thumb, Alex and I are talking about AVL / Premier League in Australia, which is a lot lower than professional leagues, but occasionally it's not so different, but some of the stats are a little bit different. But probably moving on to kill percentage, I think, again, going back to like that number that we've had in our head for years from sort of the Oz programs we've been a part of, like I've been told 45% for pass hitters, around 70 to 80 for middles, and around 60 for opposites in terms of kill percentage, just flat out. How many times do you get set? How many times you kill? Yeah. It's as simple as that. That's what I've been told. Have you been told anything different?
Yeah, I've been told the same, but I always criticize kill percentage as a stat coaches often look at a little too closely.
Much. Yeah, I agree.
Because I don't mind, like some hitters will be at 35%, 40%, but as like, because kill percentage is a straight kill over attempts.
Yeah.
Versus kill efficiency brings in the influence of errors.
Yeah.
So I personally prefer and like players that are low error, giving chances to stay and win. Some players on your starting 6 to be like that. You do need some that just blast.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned it earlier that came in a little bit that we've looked at, like the rally win rate for players that you love, like Slivka and stuff. That
people who
that are
recycle
crafty,
and stuff.
Or we looked earlier this week at TJ DeFalco in the SV League, was having a pretty off game, but he was still being very influential in his attack, so he could still sustain a reasonable kill percentage, kill efficiency through that.
No, I agree. I often sort of evaluate myself as a player that I don't kill the ball more than other teammates that we have, but I do influence the rally in mostly positive times a lot. But that often reflects in my kill percentage. Is I am normally hovering around that 30% to 25% even, but something that I coach and I also implement in my own game after watching players, because I'm not a big guy compared to our other hitters. And if I can't win the point, I will find a way to put pressure on the other team. And that is where you get that rally success rate, where it's like, okay, I've put them out of system. Now we can go and triple block or get a defensive touch, or they're out of system, we get a free ball, and then we run through our middles. That's a similar play style that I've not modeled myself on, but sort of borrowed from players that I looked up to, like your Slivkas and your TJ DeFalcos and stuff. I'll say TJ DeFalco blasts the ball a lot more than I do because he can. But especially like your Alexander Slivka sort of play style where it's like, all right, I can't win the point with this, but I'm going to put pressure on them as opposed to just free ball or like whatever it may be.
So you can connect a couple different stats to build that image with watching the games. Also like other sports use, NBA uses it heaps, like a plus minus. They grade that plus minus to a lot more than what volleyball sheets have a plus minus. Plus minus on a volleyball sheet is just errors versus points won.
Yeah.
But you can see players that have higher positives versus negatives. Yeah. Like even if you've hit 20 kills but you're sitting at a negative 10, you're not really assisting the team.
Yeah, because you've made however many errors. That would be a wild stat. But anyways.
Could be at a -8.
Yeah, but like, for example, if and this would happen regularly where I don't really hit, like I'll probably hit like 6-8 kills a game, whereas other pass hitters in the team will hit like, 12 to 15, or you'll hit 12 to 15. And then that will show in the positives and negatives of the influence of the game. Below is like, I'll be really low. But in reality, I've been set a good amount of time, recycled and run through the middle, or tipped into the setter and forced a free ball, and then we run through the middle, we run through you, or that's my own observation the last 2 years of really going, all right, like maturing as a player is understanding your role and sort of going, all right, well, I'm not going to be a guy that goes and hits 15 kills. I don't really care too much about it.
Yeah, because you can contextualize it with position.
Yeah.
But you can also contextualize it with role.
Yeah, right.
Because there's so much we want to talk about it in the future as well and investigate the starting rows. Which middle do you start where? Which pass hitter do you start where?
Yeah, it all
influences. If you're the pass hitter playing close, maybe you're expected to side out that little bit higher rate to hit at a higher efficiency and a higher kill percentage.
Yeah.
If you're that other pass hitter, maybe you're looking to recycle and run other options a little bit more. So there's so much variety even in the starting six about what your numbers should be at.
And even just listening to us so far, like be careful not to overthink it. I definitely overthink it regularly. But also like even just going as simple as that, like close and far pass hitters, like pass hitters that are close versus far. I've spent a lot of time thinking about like when I coach, like, all right, who should I put there?
Yeah.
Sometimes like when we found out about the WA women's libero playing six purely because she's just a really good six defender, sometimes you should just keep it really simple like that. You don't need all these stats. Yeah, they're helpful if you know how to interpret them properly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't, but sometimes you can just keep it really simple.
Well, you can ignore it sometimes as well. Like
just go with what you feel.
One of my juniors was like, why do you keep playing me close? You know I hate being the close pass hitter. I don't like doing it in other teams.
Yeah.
I go, it's just because I don't want you next to this other guy because you just make errors at the same time. I was like, that's kind of like it's being clear on roles, but then it's like, this is why I've done it.
And sometimes you could have the best justification and viable culture-wise just isn't there.
Like, or the outcome just isn't. Like decisions, they happen. Volleyball's
it's just
game of errors, but you just get
wrong.
Outcome goes wrong.
Yeah. And that's the key part of all the stats talk and the analytics talk is that it's not the whole story. Even on some previous episodes, we've treated it like the whole story because we haven't had time to go and watch the games and develop context behind the stats that are in front of us just because of time constraints and we're working, traveling, whatever. But as a coach, if you're listening to this, it's definitely not something. Well, I've been told by greater coaches that this is not the whole story. You have to have context. You have to have biggest thing about stats that we've learned recently is there's no, well, actually, funny, Volley Station does this, but Data Volley does not. So they're just two different stats services that the leagues like to use. There's no time context behind stats on the current stat sheets we look at. So for example, when certain subs happen, for example, and players' statistics change or they suddenly get more load and their efficiencies come down, you don't get to see the story. Or you know how in AFL they call it the worm? Like they call it the worm, like with like that graph that sort of goes up and down based on teams hitting efficiency. If there was a way to implement that into stat sheets, that would be really informative, I think, because it's like, for example, looking at TJ DeFalco, just looking at his stat sheet, you would think like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like, I think it was like 35 balls at 50% efficiency. You'd look at that and go like, wow, that was really good. But if you watch that game, it didn't look like he was playing that well.
He's windmilling. He was
tipping. He was getting blocked.
Yeah.
He was making errors. Like, so, but then on stats, it was like, wow, he was really good. Like got set 35 times, but like no one else on his team really got set other than Mia Ora. So context in timing is important that you don't get on most stat sheets. On the Volley Station one, you can scroll down. It gives you like a play.
It gives you like other sports have it. I'm saying basketball again has that where you track there. Yeah, you can track gameplay, game by game, like minute by minute, sort of what they're tracking on. Does basketball do the worm? No, it doesn't really have that. It just, you can see sort of people's percentages as they. I feel like anyone listening from like overseas is like, what is this worm? What is this worm? What is this worm? It's like it's just a graph. Yeah, of over the timeline of the game. What does AFL make that? Is it prediction or is it genuine just goal swing? I don't actually know what the worm is. Is it the points for versus against goal? Like I think it is. That, like 6 unanswered goals. So they're up here and then they points and but you can also for AFL do like time in forward 50, time in defensive 50. Yeah, that's true. You don't really get that in volleyball because the ball's always crossing over the net, but you could do time under pressure, or you could do like percentage side out first ball, or really. Like, I think one of my favorite things to look at is the plus minus in different rotations based on where the setter is. I was just going to get to that. You can look through. So setters are a bit hard to gauge efficiency wise because they're just judged based on the team outcome. But you can see how good their decision making is in different spots potentially, because if a team, when the setter's in 1, is winning 5 points and then losing when the setter's in 4 in front court, like I agree. I enjoy rotational statistics because then you go, all right, we are strong in these rotations. So it's just more information. You can look at why. Who's in my passing lineup? Who's in my blocking lineup here? Yeah. But then also that can change on the team that you play. Like you might match up really differently depending on who you're playing with different rotations and such. But moving on slowly, defensive rate / transition attack, that is very closely aligned with the breakpoint percentages in the sense that how often do you get a dig? Do you then side out? Do you win that point specifically? I like that because I'm a big out of system guy. I really enjoy teams that can win or score or at least what was that rally percentage again? Like rally win percentage after a contact, after attack, out of system. That way there's some sort of metric. Or kill on non-first attack. Yeah. Although a lot of things list kill on first attack, but it's like, I want to know the kill on the not second, first attack. Yeah, like because I really like the out of system stuff because I feel like we're moving more as a sport, at least looking at the Polish league last year and listening to some really high level coaches talk about the way the sport is moving towards this.
you need to be dominant out of system. And I'm a big fan of that. I think that's really
Yeah, I did so much of that as a junior with one of my coaches. Was literally like, you're in system never because you guys can't pass. So let's just really work on your skills to make sure you can all adjust to sets and middles that can transition and present even if the set is pulled back to the 3 meter line, like all this other stuff.
I also really like that because as a passer myself, I've played in teams, and even us, we used to be the team that relied on perfect passing, and that was so much pressure if we weren't passing.
Yeah,
well.
or it would be forced the blame on the
On the
passing
passes,
line.
which is like, you need
it is their fault.
You need to be accountable. That's fine. But like, if you can be a team that can score with good passing or with bad passing, there's no pressure suddenly. Like I can pass bad, not that I want to pass bad, but I can feel okay with going, oh, this is a really good server. And it's like, we haven't passed well all game.
Yeah.
I got to pass this ball well. Like it's like, oh, this is a good serve. I can just put this high in the middle. We can score out of system.
Usable. And if we can still activate each segment of the court through a pipe, even if we're not activating the middle, if you can activate a pipe and a back A, you're still getting the other half of the court activated versus those teams that really struggle.
Yeah.
Out of system, this one's going to their front court pass hitter. There we go.
No, exactly. And even talking about that a little bit more, like you don't even, something that I build in my play style now is you actually don't have to score out of system, but you have to, again, build that positive situation where it's like, all right now we're in a negative situation. How can I not lose the point, but maybe I can't win the point. Maybe I'm up against 3 blocks, maybe this, that, what, like X, Y, Z, whatever. Maybe it's just, all right, I need to put us in a positive situation. I can just give the ball straight to the setter on the other side. Or if that set has front court, I got to do a little bit more work to, again, not lose the point, but if I can't score, I've got to find a way to put us back on the front foot. I like that mindset of the game. I know some coaches really just want to go and score out of system, which I don't disagree with, but sometimes you just can't.
Yeah.
And you're going to be punished. Well, you may, depending on the
Forcing
team.
it.
Yeah, you'll be punished forcing it, I think. But yeah, I know you're a big out of system guy, being an opposite as well. Like you sort of have to be.
But I'm also like everyone has their own opinion on it, probably as a player.
Yeah.
I'm a big give room to play.
Yeah.
Not tight or inside.
Give specifics on the set.
Yeah, give room for a hitter to make options and adjust their transition to the set.
Yeah.
Rather than, or maybe some setters do it as well. I'm going to set a ball like this because I want them to hit here.
Yeah.
I need him to be playing cross. I'm going to drop it inside. But it's let him be comfortable. Yeah.
Put me as close to the block as you possibly can so I can wipe.
Well, that's saying,
me.
we saw Sakita and DeFalco have a pretty bad connection because they're probably just asking for different things and they're communicating that with each other mid-game. So it's tough.
That's
it's
true.
a tough jumble. And there's different parts of the game that call for different things.
Yeah. Like an out of system ball from 4 meters is different from 8 meters, right? Like from 4 meters, most setters, that's not, it's not really an out of system ball.
You'd still run first tempo from there.
Exactly. All right. Moving on though. This episode is brought to you by Andor Financial.
Now, as some of you know, a good friend of ours, good friend of the show, and our Melbourne Uni Renegades captain, Michael Cirillo, has recently started his own mortgage broking business.
Not only this, but Mike and Andor Financial have committed to supporting and sponsoring Net Talk for the indefinite future.
If you didn't know, Mike has spent the last 10 years in the finance industry in both financial planning and mortgage broking roles and is super passionate about empowering people to take control of their financial future.
So you or if anyone you know is in need of a home loan or would like to review their current lending situation, reach out to Mike and Andor Financial.
You can find out more information in the footnotes or description down below.
Thank you again to Andor Financial for sponsoring Net Talk. All right, we're back. Okay, so this is a good one. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because this could be an entire episode. Yeah. But utilizing stats. So once you've got all your stats and stuff like that, what do you do with the stats afterwards? I can talk about my experiences as a player and a coach, and you can as well. But in terms of going back to training and going all right, this is X, Y, Z. How do we deal with it? I can say as an athlete, it's mostly just about what do I need to work on? my coach for Renegades is over the years just sort of like, a few years ago, probably before COVID, my passing stats were real bad as a pass hitter. Like I was below a 2 average, which is, if you're passing out of 3, you want to be at least in between 2 and 3 as a pass hitter. And I was just below, I think I was like a 1.9 or something like that. So that was something that I was just like, all right, I need to work on this. And then through my own devices, I've decided that I would rather be that second sort of team pass hitter. I can go and kill the ball, but we're a team that is very dominant through the middle. So I would rather help the team go and do that. And we've got another pass hitter and another opposite and another pass hitter that can just go and score. So I'm that utility multifaceted role, and I've just built into that. As a coach though, depending on the team will depend on what I sort of want to work on. This year specifically for the Res 1 men that I had, there wasn't a lot of stats available to me because I was a solo coach, no assistants. A few games we had stats for because some of the players opted to do them. It wasn't a data volley kind of deal. It was just an Excel spreadsheet, and I just wanted to
write it down.
Yeah, so I think I pretty much asked them for distribution stats so I could see if we are overloading certain players, and kill efficiency and serving and serve reception. I think they were like the 4 or 5 stats. And basically it was just what are we weak at right now and what are we really strong at? Because there's 4 topics I've got here. But what I've learned as a coach is like whatever we're really good at, I want to keep working on that. And whatever we're really bad at, I want to bring that up a little bit. But I don't want to just neglect the thing that we're really good at.
Because then you become bad at it.
Because then we become bad at it. But I don't want to neglect the thing we're really bad at. I do want to address it. And everything in the middle can sort of be addressed, touched on here and there. And
you can find ways to minimize it through your game plans.
But that's how I interpret, analyze, and utilize that. And at a Res 1 level, even at a Prem 1 level, we are not using stats. And I would even dare say most AVSL teams probably aren't using stats to the point where they are bending their entire game plan. Like, yes, obviously with I assume most teams will be like, all right, we're aware that this team runs like this. We'll have to adjust our blocking, adjust our serving and X, Y, Z. But other than that, I don't think much.
No, I'm a fan of like be a bit fluid to play your game style rather than changing it because if you have the talent, I mean, all the teams do, you have the talent to trust your players to be flexible with what they see and make the most of that. Yeah. Which is good. Like that's all I'd ask of teams and a coach is to give some trust to players. Yeah. As a player myself, I had similar path to I needed to find more efficiency or more kill percentage as an opposite through attack. Yeah. And that was something I've tried to find more and more through grumpy yelling. So just to refine on my side. Yeah. Which is a hard thing to try and do if you're changing it up. So
it's really not as simple as just go and hit the ball harder or go in. Because like that's the other thing with stats. It's very specific to context or situations. Like, and we don't have access to a whole lot of data, but I imagine just from like knowing you over the years that it would have been like you need to find more efficiency through the backcourt.
Yeah, well, you're adjusting a lot of different things then at trainings because you can say, all right, we'll just work on your arm swing to speed it up. Yeah. Actually, I need to work on my footwork in transition, my timing, my defensive movement, that sort of stuff.
Let's not talk about defensive movement. We haven't had that joke for a little while.
Yeah, because it's been so good because I haven't been playing.
So I was like, okay.
But it's very hard to then over rely on that stuff at training. So I'm like teams that I think thrive are teams that are fluid in that and players that can change and vary. Sort of that. I don't know. We've spoken about it a little bit like an A versus B team at training. I don't love because I like players having to be in different environments with different setters to prove that if the ball is there, they can play because yes, you do need work next to certain people that you will be next to in game.
Yeah.
But you also want to be across from those people because they're probably
Just as
better
good
attackers too.
Yeah.
So like getting that variety in terms of that, not just always being on the same side, because then if something goes wrong, you just don't get to work on any flexibility. And like if you're just stopping points because something went wrong and then starting again, you're not really getting the scrappy work. You're just calling it there and going, it'll be fine.
And it's always the same too. If you're doing A versus B, I feel like it's always the same. Whereas I feel like, well, it, again, depends on context. Like for AVL, for example, maybe you could make an argument for it because it's so short and you don't have that long exposure of playing with players that you're going to play with. But even then, maybe it's like, I like the idea of like exposure to situations. Like something that I've been taught as a coach is to do a lot, and I've gravitated towards this in the last like 2 years, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from the people that I've coached, is lots of exposure to gameplay and teaching within gameplay environments, not just letting them play games. That's different.
Yeah.
Putting 6-on-6 and actually go and feed balls into positions and go, right, we're gonna learn how to run free ball offense in this situation or in this rotation. Teaching in 6-on-6 and then letting them play out the rally every time so they get that exposure. I know that's a longer topic, but
even game style drills that can isolate one specific skill as the focus, you still have the other influences rather than a libero just passing free balls.
Yeah, it's not
get them running other things.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, and it's exposure to being adaptable and playing in a game situation, and then that's more easily applicable to actual games as opposed to just doing very specific drills that, yes, they address the issue, but maybe it's not, doesn't make sense or it doesn't feel comfortable in gameplay context for XYZ.
Although something, I'd like to hear your opinion. Something I think that's lost a little too early in a lot of volleyball pathways is a focus on actual skill development and refining stuff. Because, I mean, volleyball in Australia isn't a professional league, but I'm even sure professional leagues would still be doing work on their defensive movement and all that.
I agree.
Versus I feel like we lose it a little bit too early to the point where we had a player on our team last year, we just did passing clinic for a week. Like, we did serve reception, defensive passing. Like,
and it was
that
good.
was the focus. And that probably needs to be introduced a little bit more across volleyball.
No, I agree. And I do think there are some constraints that Australian volleyball specifically faces. Like, these professional leagues get to train every single day, potentially even more than maybe twice a day. So they can probably do a technical session and a gameplay session or whatever it may be. Like, you watch Eric Shoji's TikTok, he's just sitting in front of a serving machine, just passing for how many hours. Like, we don't really get to do that. We get to train twice a week for an hour, 2 hours, and then that's it. In
groups where, but you can kind of merge them. So, you're working on passing, this guy's working on serving.
Yeah.
But then it sometimes disjoints it, because if they're working on serving, they're trying their thing. So maybe it just makes your session a bit shaky too.
I agree. And like, I have two scenarios right now where I've got a team situation where I've got to teach this team these skills so we can go out and win, because we're in the middle of the season or at the start of the season or whatever it is. But I've got this one player, and I won't name him, but he'll know who he is. Not that he'll probably listen to this, but like, very, very tall, very athletic. Like, I'm talking tickling 7 foot, but also has not played a lot of volleyball. And when I say not a lot of volleyball, I mean he's been in the sport for 8 months. So how do I, as a coach, balance teaching him one-on-one technical skills, which I don't really agree with. I think you should always teach in a group environment, because volleyball's a team sport, group sport, versus addressing the team's needs. Very difficult. I'm in the exact same bloody situation right now with women's post-season / pre-season, because we're in that weird phase of the year. Again, very, very tall, athletic girl who is coming from a different sport, who I need to prepare, but it's like, I've got 18 other girls who are here for post / pre-season training. They want to get the team systems in because I'm taking women's next year. So it's like this balancing act. And I can see how in pro leagues, how if you've got 5 sessions a week, it's very easy to go, right, 2 sessions we're doing nothing but passing or nothing but setting, or like the very, very skill orientated just technical stuff, no gameplay. And then the other 3 sessions, it's like, we're going to do gameplay. It's tough. I agree with you. I think we need to do more of it, but it's just about like, when do we do it?
Yeah, because I mean, to grow skills, you need to be doing it more than twice a week. But most teams only train twice a week.
But I even disagree. There's a lot of teams I'm aware of in Prem League that train once a week.
Yeah.
So it's like
in shared venues.
Yeah. So, and like, combined with other teams. So it's like, it is a genuine like restriction, I guess, in terms of just the infrastructure of Australian volleyball, because it is a smaller sport. I agree with you though. I think I'm trying it now. For example, with the sessions that I have, they're 3 hours long. We've got the venue for 3 hours, which for my traditional planning for sessions is actually too long. And I discovered this with the Res 1 men this year's season, that 3 hours is too long to do a traditional training. So I tried to break it up with the first hour being very, very low intensity, like borderline didn't need to do a warm up, just technical skills training. And then the next 2 hours is, all right, it's team training, gameplay, game drills. Like that's the team training. Worked to some effect. Probably need to adjust it a little bit towards the end because it not got out of hand, but we became a bit too relaxed with what we were doing. We were just sort of mucking around a little bit for the first hour, but like that was a bit of team culture.
Yeah.
But like, what would you do? What would you do with the juniors?
Yeah, I copied you.
Well, we were next to each other, right? Like,
yeah,
so
we
easy.
kind of shifted. Like, I mean, junior development. It was my first time coaching, and I was trying to put myself back in their shoes of what I did, and what I was very fortunate to do was jump a few hoops and play up a little bit in other training environments where you really get put in your place, being like, oh, that's where I need to be.
Yeah.
Versus maybe we isolated a little bit this last year, but still got like gameplay against other teams. But so it's very tough as a training group to have such a long period.
Yeah, because 3 hours is a long time for Australian volleyball. It's rare that you would hear of teams training for 3 hours.
With a little bit more flexible numbers on the junior side, just due to commitments.
Just like they're at school, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just different. And when volleyball's not a big sport, we're not getting the priority.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just the way it is. Moving on to the last stat thing before we move on to another topic. Ace error versus number of serves. I like this stat a lot. I'll explain it a little bit. So ace versus error, that we're talking about the ratio. How many errors to how many aces? International volleyball, what I've seen thrown around on blogs and other podcasts and interviews and stuff, is a 2-to-1 ratio is good. Like, we are very happy with that. So that's 2 errors to 1 ace. So something that I commonly see is like a 10 errors to 5 aces as a team.
Yeah.
I've even heard of some people being pretty okay with a 3-to-1, in the sense that if you're, sitting at 18, like it's not super common, but when you got teams that are firing serves ridiculously, they're making a lot of errors, but they're also making a good amount of aces. 6 doesn't sound like a lot, but the stat to add into that is number of serves.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting at a 3-to-1 ratio, but your number of serves is really high, that tells you that if you're not acing or erroring, you are serving a lot in that rotation or that server or whatever. But like, that's my interpretation. I like 2-to-1. 3-to-1 sounds too much to me.
I think that then means the errors get away from you a little bit. It's hard to counteract that with your number of
point
serves.
Scoring and stuff like that. Yeah.
Because the number of serves means you're putting pressure on with your serve.
Yeah.
You don't want a player that is ace or error.
No.
Or 2 errors, 1 ace. If every time they go behind the baseline, it's error.
It's one or the other.
Error.
Yeah.
Ace, then error, ace. If that's happening to every player on your team, yes, you're getting aces, but you're just losing points behind the baseline.
Yeah.
Versus that error rate is probably assuming that you're maybe getting 1 ace, 1 serve in, one error.
Yeah.
2 serves in, another error.
That's the assumption for most of these players.
Yeah. But some people might hear a 2-1 and go, it's fine for me to make these 2 errors because the next one's going to be an ace. But it's really, you need to be getting some rhythm behind those serves going in as well.
Yeah.
Because they all contribute together.
Yeah. And I personally think 2-1 is probably more of a team statistic than it is an individual statistic.
Yeah.
Because if you kind of think about it, and this is where I go a little bit into the speculation territory in terms of stats, because again, no one's taught me how to interpret any of this. So I'm just going off of what I've seen, what I've played, and what I sort of know. 2-1 for a team makes a bit more sense to me because as a player, you might be at like a 1.5-1. So I might have served like 4 or 5 errors and then gotten 2 or 3 aces. And that's kind of close enough to that mark. But then someone else on my team might have had a really bad serving day and they might be at like 6 errors and like 1 ace or no aces, right?
Yeah.
So that inflates it a bit. Because if everyone on the team is serving at 2-1, I just don't know if that's effective serving. Like I just feel like that sounds terrible.
That's why you also want to see the team number of attempts because you're going to have a lot of players that are 0 error. Yeah. 0 ace.
Well, most of you
0 errors, 1 ace.
Yeah.
So sort of that is then an expectation for those players. That's something as a coach you can communicate. I had a player that I was very encouraging of going through his full big approach, jump
every
time, because we could shelter that with our other players being more efficient.
Yeah.
Because a little bit less win focus, like develop that skill in game scenario and game environment rather than the other issues. So like you can be very fluid on a player by player basis in your starting lineup.
I agree. And another thing with coaching and role clarification, when people say role clarification, some people think that means just like I'm pass hitter 1 or I'm pass hitter 2. What I actually think is like, what type of pass hitter are you? That includes what type of server are you? For example, looking at like international teams, what coach on the planet is not going to let Namir go for his serve every single time?
Yeah.
Like that's a player you look at and you go, we could serve this entire match. And if you don't make 1 ball in, I'm kind of okay with that because the one time that you do and you go on a rhythm, it's going to swing this whole match.
Yeah.
Like he's a player you're like, but you can't have an entire team of that.
No.
Like you've got to have one guy who's got the license and then whoever serves after him regularly, it's going to be like, all right, if he misses, I put my ball in. And that's kind of where you can play a little bit as a coach. Like, which player actually follows him? Do I put my jump server after Namir or do I put my float server after Namir? Like those are small things you could consider in starting lineups. Again, that starting lineup conversation needs to be a whole maybe 3 episodes.
Because then you can't get afraid of errors. Because I know also on that Netherlands team there was a middle I was looking at for VNL Fantasy who I had that was a error-prone guy, but he wasn't a high ace guy, but he still had positive influence on the game. And I have they would never withdraw him, even though his serving stats didn't look too good. Yeah. But it's just one of those things that you just want to keep
in mind.
Yeah.
And that is a lot.
You can weather that storm.
No, you can. And like, that was the one thing too, is like me personally as a coach, I don't like to focus on errors a lot. I like to encourage the right kind of errors.
Yeah.
Obviously there's when the wrong kind of errors start slipping and it's kind of like, okay, let's calm down here. Like, let's figure it out. But a lot of, and this may just be Australian volleyball. I'm not sure what the culture is like overseas, but there is a very strong negative culture in Australia about making errors. Like the women's team that I'm about to take over, a lot of the mindset in the women's program is negative. Errors are extremely negative. So something that I've noticed and we've spoken about a lot as a group, as a post-season sort of Premier 1, Premier 2 group, is we are very conservative when it comes to outer system and very conservative when it comes to serving. Like I'm teaching quite mature athletes jump serving because they want to do it, but they've always been told, no, you have to be safe server. And it's like, well, I'm not going to say I'm not going to teach you something you want to learn. So I'll teach you. But it's interesting to me that we have this very, very conservative mindset on making errors, which I disagree with. There's going to be some pushback on that, and I understand. And there's always going to be like what errors are we okay with? How many errors are we okay with? But like, is it the same for you with the juniors?
Yeah, it's errors of, well, for juniors mainly, it's errors of execution rather than decision making. Like I want to be making sure that we are consistently making good decisions or have the right thought processes behind them. But if we miss that international hitting zone, that edge meter of the court, that's okay. If we beat a defender, that's okay. If we're going back behind a service line, not doing a service routine and serving it outside the antenna, why did that go wrong? Obvious reasons. Let's not do that. But if we go back, go through our protocol and whatnot and miss long, that's a positive error because we're trying something, we're working on being aggressive. You can catch a defender here and there versus other things that don't even get you the opportunity to win a point.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because like, again, we're running out of time here, but decision-making errors versus actual execution errors, I really like that distinction because I think a lot of the negative errors come from decision-making errors with the caveat that like the decision-making errors are usually due to the fear of making errors. Like, does that make sense? Like,
Like, I'm going to standing roll this one instead of actually transitioning behind on a high ball and then
put into the net or
do
whack it out or like, so like trying to get my men out of that mindset this year when I had them of like, hey, if you're out of system and you're going up against a big triple block, I would much rather you whack that ball out a country mile because you're going for high fingers than to get roofed. Like, what kind of error are we okay with here? Because at the moment it was either just free ball it over when I know I'm going to get a triple block or tip or like, I don't mind the tip. I'm not saying
it's useful.
I'm just trying to change the mindset of like, I want you to be okay with going for that.
Think about looking and contacting high and playing high over a block, because that also then puts you in a better position to maybe hit sharp if that outside blocker is late, to play down the line from a better position rather than, there's a true block in front of me, so I just thought I'd hit it flat and into the top of the tape.
So, and like these are all going to be things different depending on your league. Like if you're a professional coach in the Plus League are listening to this, not that you're going to be, but like maybe, you never know. But like that mindset of what errors are we okay with is going to be very different. At a Res 1 level, at a Prem 1 level, Gus is not going to be okay with me if I whack that ball out a country mile, like jump for the top of the block. But like at least having had gone through that mindset of like, okay, I've narrowed down the decisions to positive decisions as opposed to just whacking the crap out of the ball.
His issue wouldn't be that. His issue would be that you didn't put yourself in a position where you had other options. You put yourself in the position where your only option was to whack it super high offhand.
Exactly right.
But you can put yourself in better opportunities.
I think that at the crux of the argument, it is the errors on decision come from errors of making errors. Fear of making errors. There was a lot of errors in that whole sentence. It was wild. And that's something that I've noticed a lot with Australian volleyball. Not that I've been exposed anywhere else, but just looking at these professional leagues, it's a really, really high bar. But looking at the types of errors that they make and that they're totally okay with, it's kind of like, there's so many errors that get made in every single game that our players are so not okay with. But if you look at them, they're doing the exact same thing. So it's like just understanding the decisions. I thought it was interesting. And that builds out the stats of like, how to react when you see the ace versus error. Or
that's a good crux to probably end on to reach the end. Is like, be very fluid in how you interpret what we say and how you interpret your own game style or games that you watch. Like we've spoken in previous weeks about what you look to watch to take for yourselves. There's so many different factors that influence so many things. So you have to really match them up next to each other, and then everyone has their own interpretation and influence over that.
And something that we said the first episode of this podcast is that there are so many different ways to win the game Like there's no absolute. Like there should never be absolutes. Even if we say there's absolutes, don't listen to us. No absolutes. And yeah, to round out that topic, like just 9 times out of 10, I think just go with what feels right.
Yeah. Let us know what you have had that feels right, that you've done over your careers as players, as coaches, as
even if it's against like what the mainstream is like meant to be like. I don't know. Yeah, this was a good little deep and shallow dive into into statistics. Statistics is always something that I really enjoy, even though I don't know the greatest deal about like just the real deep dive analytical side of it. It's something that I really want to get into because I think it is really valuable.
Yeah, I just like looking at them as being markers of where things are at.
Yeah. And also, as you mentioned, most other sports have these really clear defined metrics on like you are ranked at this player because you have these skills, whereas volleyball is very much up for interpretation.
Yeah, sometimes there's those coaches that are like, we need to hit this marker and almost we'll win. Then you hit that marker and you still lose. So it like, doesn't matter. It's like, we need a side out at 70% and get 5 blocks. Well, you just did that
and you still
for
lost.
4 games and you still like lost. So it's like,
And like I've actually been in teams where we hit those metric markers and we lose.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, what else? Like it's not the whole story, but maybe if volleyball progressed the analytical side like a basketball, like an AFL or whatever the other. I don't really know much about football statistics, but I imagine I imagine they're pretty nuts. Like, you know, there's a lot of debate about like who's the best player in the world, but like I wonder if there was enough metrics around, you'd probably be able to quantify who it would be. But then there's lots of interpretation on that and whatever. That's another discussion. Thanks for tuning in this episode. Appreciate listening to us yap about stats and stuff. You got anything else to say?
No, I was just letting that error of a sentence play out.
It's been a long day for me. A lot of talking, a lot of yapping.
Yeah,
As I said, I'm tired, guys.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep well last night. And now I've got to go apply all this information tonight with my girls. It's going to be great. And you got to do it. Well, no, Adam's taking
I'll just sit back, learn.
Yeah. Please feel free, if you enjoyed this, to subscribe, leave a review, hopefully a good one. Follow on all our social media pages. Keep an eye out for our Instagram stories and reels. We're going to be posting some questions and stuff. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you next time.
And goodbye.